Okay, Mr. John Schwartzman, thank you very much for being on the pod, and you're very welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So, for some of you who doesn't know who John Schwartzman is, I'm gonna read some of the director, movies, and actors he has worked with. So sit tight. He has worked with Michael Bay, Richard Donner, Ron Howard, Gary Ross, John Lee Hancock, Michel Gondry, and Paul Feig, among others. He is the responsible of the cinematography for The Rock, Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, Conspiracy Theory, Seabiscuit, The Rookie, Meet the Fockers, The Green Hornet, The Amazing Spider-Man, Saving Mr. Banks, Jurassic World, The Founder, The Little Things, The School of Good and Evil, and the TV show that it's right now out called Talamasca, among others. And he is responsible for lighting Sean Connery, Ed Harris, Mel Gibson, Julia Roberts, Bruce Willis, Ben Affleck, Matthew McConaughey, Dennis Quaid, Tobey Maguire, Jeff Bridges, Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Barbara Streisand, Ben Stiller, Nick Cage, Diane Kruger, Helen Mirren, Jack Nicholson, Morgan Freeman, Cameron Diaz, Seth Rogen, Emma Stone, Andrew Garfield, Martin Sheen, Sally Field, Emma Thompson, Tom Hanks, Colin Farrell, Chris Pratt, Michael Keaton, Laura Dern, Naomi Watts, Anna Kendrick, Blake Lively, Kevin Costner, Kathy Bates, Woody Harrelson, Jeff Goldblum, Donald Sutherland, Kate Blanchett, Charlize Theron, Kerry Washington, Michelle Yeoh, Lawrence Fishburne, Jennifer Lopez, and Sydney Sweeney. And I'm sure I'm missing somebody. John.
Boy, now I feel old.
Oh my God, what a career!
Accomplished, not
Oh my
old.
God, I was going through your films over the week, and at some point, I was John has photographed every single actor in this business, all of them.
Except for Meryl Streep. She's the only big movie star that I haven't had the opportunity to work with. But look, it's a great blessing to have gotten to collaborate with those actors. And as we all know, as because I'm talking to two cinematographers, they're your dance partner for however long the film is. And obviously every dance partner is different. Some are very accomplished with the steps, like a Tom Hanks who does no problem with the mechanics. And others are a little more freeform, like an Andrew Garfield, right? You have Andrew Garfield who kind of does what he wants to do, and then you've got Emma Stone who will literally hit every mark that she said she was going to hit when you did the rehearsal. And you have to be, as a cinematographer, we all know, we're there to ultimately capture the performance. And when I say capture the performance, it's obviously creating the mood, choosing the lenses that we think is appropriate for the scene that we're telling. But at the same time, we have to do it in a way that allows actors to feel safe, comfortable, and also that they have a certain amount of freedom and authorship. Even if they don't actually, it's our job to make them feel as though it's their idea, right? That is, I'm a big believer in the more I can get the actors on my side, the easier it is if I have to come to them and say, look, I need some help here, right? A perfect example is there's a sequence in Saving Mr. Banks, and Colin Farrell is one of the loveliest, greatest actors I've ever had the pleasure of working with, amongst a lot of others. And we had a very young girl who had never acted before. And it's a scene, he rides up on a horse, they get down, they sit together, they have a conversation, she gets up on the horse and they ride away. Not in itself that complicated. And I don't normally shoot with a lot. I try not to shoot with multiple cameras, only because I find that it's easier for me to focus if I have one camera. Now, action and explosions, that's a different set of rules. And I said to Colin, are you okay if we shoot all of the coverage at once, 3 cameras, raking shots and a front shot? And I said, because I don't know if Rosie's going to be able to, I don't know if what she gives you on take 1 is going to be the same on take 3. And I think we're trying to catch lightning in a bottle here. And he said, 100%. let's do it. And that's what happens when you have a good relationship with an actor, right? Some people probably wouldn't. Sean Connery certainly would not have agreed to that.
Uh-huh.
Really? You find that a lot of actors typically like focusing just on the single frame and this is it?
It depends. Obviously, when you've got somebody like Michael Bay directing, he's bigger than any actor on the movie, right? So the actors are going to do whatever Michael wants. But other directors are what I would call actors directors, and they're going to want to defer to what the actor wants. With Denzel Washington, you're not running two cameras. You're lucky if you can get one.
You'd rather it be a play?
He's just challenging, let me put it that way. He's an amazing actor, but he's more difficult day to day than Charlize is.
Well, see, the
And
first one.
that's not a knock. That's just his process, right? Mm-hmm. And as cinematographers, we all know you have to understand their process and then figure out how you're going to be able to do your job, but give the actors the room in which they need to do their job, right? You can't just say, you're going to walk from here, you're going to stop here, you're going to look just tight camera right. Now, you can do that with Tom Hanks. You can do that with Bruce Willis, but you can't do that with Denzel Washington. You can't do that with Emma Thompson, right? And they're all lovely people. They just have different ways of working.
Mm-hmm. So, John, we were talking before we started taping about film. You made most of your career on film. How was the transition to digital for you? It's something that you have enjoyed or something that you do it because you have to and you still miss film? How you live on that end?
I love all of the mediums. And you have to understand that the first movie that I shot digital was Spider-Man, and that was done in 3D, and it was shot with prototype red epics, right, in which they were writing the software for the camera as I was shooting. I needed small cameras to fit in a 3D rig, to the point at which we actually went back and re-debayered literally 500 terabytes of dailies halfway through the movie because the Red Code 3 color software had gotten better, right? So if there was anything to put you off on digital, it would have been that experience. But in fact, I really enjoyed it. Granted, the 3D aspect of it was a bit painful, just in the nature of all of the kind of mechanical stuff that goes on. So that was my first foray into digital, but I still shoot film. The Jurassics were not only shot on film, they were shot on 65 millimeter large format film. Mm-hmm. You have to look at the media and figure out what its strengths and weaknesses are, and you work to the strengths, right? The Red Epic at the time didn't have a great dynamic range, but I was building sets and I was able to light them to work to the strengths of the cameras, right? If I was outside in Hawaii shooting with the bright sunlight and the clouds and the jungles, I don't think it would have been as successful as shooting with film. Mm-hmm. And obviously we all know that film, because it's a negative process, builds up more density on the negative as the highlights overexpose. So you're actually getting more information. So you don't have to worry about losing the clouds and the skies. Mm-hmm. So obviously when I went to do Jurassic and they said we're going to shoot film, and I had already done Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, I knew how challenging Hawaii can be with the trade winds and the clouds coming by every 20 seconds. I was relieved. I knew I had a certain cushion built in. Now that said, the Alexa 35 is very much like shooting a film camera, right? So is the Sony Venice 2. The money is being spent on developing digital cameras, and they're getting closer and closer to the dynamic range, the ability to retain highlights that film has. I do love the kind of old school that the magazine, in the case of Jurassic, we were only using 500-foot magazines, which meant we had 4 minutes of running time. So the director had to say action and he had to say cut. And it is still my belief that the best directing and the best filmmaking happens between cut and the next time you say action versus just leaving the camera running. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, Paul Feig, who I've done 7 movies with, doesn't like to turn. He loves digital. He loves having a 40-minute mag in the camera. I feel bad for the boom operator, but that's his directing style. When he was shooting Bridesmaids, he had 2,000-foot magazines, right? So they would run for almost 20 minutes. He's a comedy improv director, and he likes to work that way. It's all fine with me. You tell me what my tool is, and I will figure out a way to make it for the movie to put it in the situation where it can succeed at its highest rate. But I still love film because I still think that Kodak color science, Vision 2, Vision 3 stocks still surpasses what we can do digitally. I still think a photochemically printed negative looks better than a scanned negative projected on a DCP. I just think the colors are better. Film has no color space. There is no color space for film.
Yeah.
And I just think there's a beauty to the ability to have just millions of shades of green that digital cameras can't quite capture yet. And certainly we know that digital cameras are blind in the certain shades of yellow and red, right? Because a digital camera is a non-continuous, the sensor cannot record continuous sine waves like film can. Now, that said, Alex, that we work around it, right? But Vittorio could not shoot The Last Emperor on a digital camera and have that kind of color with the ENR process and all of that. You could approximate it, but I don't think you could get there with the color. So that's the downside to digital. That said, its sensitivity to low light, its ability to work, at night with very little augmentation is a blessing for moving quickly.
Do you, in those situations where, well, I guess I'll back up a little bit. You kind of hit on something that Wanmi and I talk about a lot, where film had some built-in guardrails, the sandbox was a certain size, digital with those cameras, lenses, lighting the way it is, the tools the way they are, the sandbox seems to have expanded quite a bit where we can do more things as cinematographers. And it's kind of self-imposed limitations, confining the sandbox a little bit in order to get a better end result. If that makes any sense. Do you find yourself
so here's
imposing?
A perfect example is you're shooting Pearl Harbor in downtown LA for downtown Honolulu. And there are parts of San Pedro that look kind of Polynesian. But 6 blocks in the background is a Chevy dealership, right? That I can't turn off. And by the way, when we did Pearl Harbor, you couldn't replace the background, right? That technology didn't exist. There was no CG. So what do? Well, first of all, the producers knew that we were shooting anamorphic at night. So we needed, let's say, a basic ambience of 40-foot candles. That's a lot of light, right? To get the lenses to, let's say, a 3.5 or a 4, which is where I like to shoot always, and I like to shoot anamorphic lenses there, especially on film because they have more contrast. By doing that, I could get the backgrounds that I didn't want to see to fall away to either darkness or just kind of specular highlights. So I was using the fact that I had the tools to light the foreground in such a way that I could de-emphasize the background. Now I can't justify to a producer, well, here's how I do justify. Now you can take a Sony Venice 2 and you can go out on any street in New York City and put it in the high gain 3200 mode, which has no noise, and you could shoot at a 2.5, right? It sees forever. But just because it has an exposure doesn't mean that it's lit, right? That's the harder thing for young cinematographers now, which is to battle for the fact that I can turn the camera on and get an image doesn't mean that this is the right image for this moment in this film. And those battles, even for somebody like me who's got 70 credits and I'm the highest grossing cinematographer in the history of cinema. I have made like $7 billion. And with the fact that the movie business is sort of failing, no one's going to catch me, right? I still can't win a lot of those battles. You know, it's tough. Now, there are other tools. I can create a vignette. I have tools now in the DI to do it. Although I'm so old school, I tend not to do it. I don't know what you guys do, but I don't relight in the DI. I can do a DI in 4 days. Yeah. I do a reel and a half a day, and I'm done in 4 days.
I couldn't agree more. I do the same. In fact, last time we meet in LA, John, remember we were both at Company 3, and I finished 1 day early, the DI. It's just like, it's the same. I try to go to the DA with the movie already finished and just polish it, but not relight anything. It's just...
Well, it's the idea of like treating the LUT like a stock, right? And shooting through that stock and get it right on set.
Well, and so I'm very low tech. So I have a LUT that for the Sony Venice 2 that Claudio Miranda made for Maverick Top Gun. And it came about because Tom Cruise doesn't like digital. But there was no way they could shoot Maverick with cameras in the cockpit of that F-18 or whatever it was, because the G-forces would stop the film from moving through the gate, right?
It will jam the film, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and also the form factor was too big. And what are you going to do? Put an IMO in there and every 60 seconds have to land and reload? So yeah. Tom understood the technical challenge. So then it became Claudio's dilemma to come up with a look for the Venice 2 that looked like film. So he came up with a 5219 LUT that he gave to me, which is the only LUT I use. It's 5219, and that's all I do.
And you work for the LUT, the way you will work for the film.
Exactly.
That's your box or your pattern, whatever. And
correct.
Yeah, exactly. I do the same.
I don't have 7 LUTs at the DIT cart.
I
wouldn't know what to do with them.
Me neither. And also my theory with that is, when I used to shoot in film, I will use with Kodak 200 or Kodak 500, and that was it. One stock for the entire film. Normally, I got the same approach for LUTs. It's one LUT for the entire film, and then I work with it, and I make it warmer, or cooler, or more contrast with the light, but not with just tweaking it. Yeah.
And I do the exact same thing. So if it was day exterior on Jurassic, it was the 65 millimeter version of 5213, which is the 200 ASA stock. And again, you're saying, why did you use 200 ASA stock? Well, I needed more depth of field. We had very expensive sets. So you're shooting 65. What is a 4-stop in 35, which is probably what I would have shot at, is now an 8-stop in 65 because of the extra real estate and the magnification of the lenses, right? So 5213 for day exterior, 5219 for interior. I remember when we were lighting Jurassic 3 and I went to Lee Walters, my gaffer in London, who's a great gaffer, and I said, Lee, I need the ambience, I need 120 foot candles of ambience. That will be 2 stops under key. Mm-hmm. And he was like, what, Gov? He goes, I haven't heard foot candles in 20 years. I said, well, start getting used to it, because we've got to think that way, because this is the world we're in, which, and I can move between those two worlds, because at the end of the day, it comes down to, where is the light coming from? Is it appropriate for the moment? And where are you putting the camera, and what lenses are you choosing to shoot it on? Not what type of lenses, but what focal length, right? People have their favorite lenses. I have certain lenses that I like, and but again, much like film stock, if I know I'm using the H series large format lenses from Panavision, which I developed for the Highwaymen, I know how they're going to look. So that's one less issue I have to think about, right? I know what this lens is going to do at a 5.6. I know exactly how much contrast it's going to have. I know all of those things so I can decide whether I'm going to shoot it at a shallower stop or a deeper stop based on my understanding of the lenses, right? People find lenses that they fall in love with because they become accustomed to them and they know how they behave, right? Just like you know how 500 Vision 2 stock or Vision 3 stock or 200 behaves. That's, you want to, in my mind as a cinematographer, I want to make that as simple as possible so I can focus on the difficult stuff, which is, where is the light coming from? What are we inside of the room? Are we with the actors, or are we outside? Are we voyeuristic, or are we right in the middle of the action? Are we on a 32 millimeter lens, or are we on a 75? And what does that mean in terms of the storytelling, right? That's where I want to spend my energy on set. Not, oh, bring me this other lens, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I would rather just keep that stuff very simple.
Love it. Yeah, we were talking about those self-imposed limitations, making the sandbox smaller so that you can kind of just fine-tune it.
Because at the end of the day, whether you're shooting on a 5D or the Alexa 65, the one thing that holds true is, where is the camera and where is the light? And I don't care which camera you're using. If you do those two things properly, you're going to tell a really compelling story. And that's what we're paid to do, right? Obviously, big budget movies, they want, you may be able to say, I want to go with large format. Let me shoot full frame 8K Venice or Alexa 65, because they have the budget, and you're doing that for a number of reasons. And these days, the big budget movies generally have visual effects. So by going to a larger format, higher resolution image, you're helping yourself down the line, right? When you take an 8K image and super sample it down to 4K, it's essentially like cooking chicken stock for another 5 hours on the stove, right? By having more photo sites and then super sampling it down, you get the best possible image. And that's my pitch. And also what visual effects gets is a very high res image to work off of that they can also super sample down.
Speaking of lenses, I have the feeling that you favor Panavision through your career. Those are a brand of lenses that you really like.
So here's the deal. I favor Panavision because when I got expelled from USC Film School, and I got expelled from USC Film School and won the Student Academy Award for cinematography. I failed cinematography and won the Student Academy Award for cinematography.
Oh my, really?
And as I was very early starting my career, I had a very low budget independent feature, and I went to Panavision. I had no money to do the movie, and they said, of course, yeah, we'll give you what you need. Obviously, it was a Panaflex, it was a set of ultra speeds. Back then, I didn't really understand the differences between lenses, but the fact that Panavision had essentially availed themselves to me made me very loyal. And as I've gone on in my career and become very good friends with Dan Sasaki, the premier lens designer there, I have never shot a movie anywhere other than Panavision. Every single movie I've done has been through Panavision. And the reason is, a camera is a box that film runs through, right? Now, I think the Arri 435 is an incredible film camera. Arri came to me very early on in my career after The Rock and said, okay, well, what would it take for you to become an Arri guy? And I said, I need you to put filters behind the lens. I shoot anamorphic, and I need my operators to be able to see focus and what they're looking at. And if you're shooting with an 85 N9 out front with an anamorphic lens, the operator can barely see the actors in the frame. If you put that filter behind the lens and you're at a 4-stop, the operator has a fighting chance, especially in film. Yes, the focus puller's job is to pull focus, but the only person who's really watching the shot is the operator. So the operator has to be able to say to the assistant, it was great, but you buzzed him a foot from the end of the dolly move. And I would always say that to my camera crew. If there's a soft shot, it's on you, the operator. It's on you, Ian Fox. You need to see this, right? He's going off of marks and he's doing the best he can, but you're the only one that can actually see it. Now that we've gone to digital, the assistant has a much better opportunity to pull focus. He gets a very high resolution image and he can see what he's doing. And we all know whether it's soft or sharp, but back in the film days, you didn't know. Pearl Harbor, we would shoot on Monday. The film would then go on a plane Tuesday morning to Los Angeles. It would go into the lab Tuesday night. It would come out of the lab Wednesday morning and get printed. I would speak to the lab. So what I shot on Wednesday, I'd get a negative report on Wednesday. And then it would get sent back to Hawaii. The editors would sync it up and we would watch it on Thursday. So, you wouldn't know if you had a buzz on Monday until Wednesday, right? But that was the world Juan Me, you and I grew up in, right? I mean, that was the standard operating procedure. And certainly now, obviously, it's a lot easier to sleep at night if you're a focus puller. Yeah. Because, and you just go, like, can we do one more? I need another. And I don't know any DP that's not going to say, you can't have another, If you want it in focus, you give your assistant another opportunity.
Yeah. God, even just hearing that, because I didn't grow up in that world. So hearing those stories I get palpitations. And I'm like, oh, God, 4 days, turn around to, know if you got it and then have to be like, okay, those contingency days, here we go.
So I was 3 hours behind. So I would get a call at 1 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday morning, 1 a.m., knowing I had to be at work at 7, from John Bickford at Technicolor telling me that everything was okay. Give me my printer lights, and he'd say it's all sharp. So at least when I showed up to go to work on Wednesday morning, I could turn to the assistant and say everything's good. Can't talk about performance, but I can tell you that we're okay.
Nice. Oh, my goodness. This... has anything changed with you in your process and the way you work with the lighting the way it is now? Okay.
No,
do you have preferences still? Or there's some guys that are like, I'm tungsten till the day I die.
Well, here's the deal. I won't use LEDs on film. Because film sees, because it's sine waves, sees all the colors. One of my best friends, Frieder Hoheim, founded and owns Kinaflow. And they make probably the best color LEDs in the business, right? And even he says, look, here are the wavelengths that an LED cannot reproduce. So when you look at Jurassic World or Jurassic World 3, that's all tungsten or HMI or Kinaflow fluorescence. A Kinaflow fluorescent has a better color spectrum than the best LED that exists today. Now that I'm working digital, I still use both. I use everything. Look, there's no way to project a hard light like there is with either an HMI or a 20K, right? The cob, the light emitting sensor, the circuitry on board that makes the light for a LED is not a point source of light. And as it gets brighter, it gets bigger. So no matter what, it's very hard to make an LED a hard point source. It's just the nature of the physics of how you build these lights versus a 5K, right? And if you want it really sharp, you take the lens out. There are things that incandescent lights can do and HMIs can do that LEDs can't do. I wouldn't say that they will never be able to do them, because God knows we're spending a lot of money developing them. But do I love the fact that I can walk into a practical location and plug LEDs into the wall outlet and not worry about blowing a fuse? You bet I do. I give me a Kinaflow Freestyle in a bag and I'm good to go. I'm very adaptable. I couldn't make a movie without a stereotubes.
Oh yeah, nowadays
one of the most versatile
it's just a
things
must.
lately. Yeah.
But would I use them? Would I use them in a shooting film? Only if I was using them for creative color. I wouldn't use them as a 3200 source. I would use a Kinaflow tube if it was off camera. But at the same time, I would throw a stereotubes all around the background if I wanted some weird party colors out of them. And they're so fast and they're so amazing, right?
And controllable, and it's and you can change the light color if you decide. Yeah, they're fantastic.
And look, you and I work all over the world, right? The show that you were talking about, this thing on AMC called Talamasca, I shot it in the Midlands of England, in Manchester. And I had a local Manchester crew who were unbelievably talented. But it's Manchester, so it's not the same lighting company. It's not, what's the big lighting company? Why am I drawing a blank? The biggest one in the world.
I'm blanking too.
They're all over London. Anyway,
Yeah.
they have Pinewood Studios, right? So those lights, they work in London. So when you're suddenly in Manchester, the guys are not, if you said I want Kinaflow freestyles, they're like, I don't know if we can get them, right? So you use what they have, and also you want to use what your crew is familiar with. I don't want to suddenly hand, a chainsaw to a plastic surgeon, right? You want everybody to feel comfortable. So we used a lot of these lights called Nanluxes, which I had never used before, which I thought were amazing, right?
Yes.
And I could power them off of batteries. I could put them on a roof for a street light. I don't know if the color was perfect, but it didn't matter because it was alleys and streets in Manchester. So if I wanted a sodium vapor look and it had a little bit extra green, that was fine with me, right? So you learn, you adapt. I very quickly learned what these lights could and couldn't do, and I took my style of lighting to make it work for what we had. You have to be flexible as a cinematographer.
I got a question about that show. You and John Lee Hancock have been working together forever. It's a really long-lasting relationship. But I believe it's the first time you and him work on a TV show together. And I also believe it's your first TV show. Has anything in the way you and John work or had worked previously in films changed because it's a TV show, or it just was a longer film, like a 2-episode long thing?
Right. So I did what was called Block 1, which is how they talk about it in TV. I did the pilot and the second episode. John Lee was the writer and the creator. He asked me to shoot it. He knew that, he said to me, look, I can't pay you what you're normally getting used to being paid. That's the way TV works. And I said, I don't care. We went to Manchester and we shot it like we were shooting a feature. We shot it with anamorphic lenses. And nothing changed other than I had a Manchester crew who was, like I said to you, as good as anybody I've ever worked with. And I utilized the lighting equipment that they were more familiar with. And it was fantastic. I had a great time. Never felt that we didn't have what we needed, and always felt like we had enough time. And we, shot the pilot in 10 days and the second episode in 9 days, and we only worked 9-hour days because that's the rules for TV in the middle of England, and it was great. I just had an exceptionally good crew, and I think also John Lee is a very, very well prepared filmmaker. So if I said to John, look, there's 8 alleys that the locations have said we can shoot in, but we need to pick 4. Do you want to meet me at this pub and let's walk the alleys tonight? I'll bring my DSLR and we'll storyboard with my still camera. He's more than happy to do that, right? So now you show up on location and you're like, okay, I need the camera over here. I need a whatever on that roof. I've given everybody the notes. And do things change? Yes, but not in a grand way, So it's not as though it's 2 guys trying to sit around figuring out what they're going to do. We know what they're going to do. Now, there may be happy accidents in the performance, and you make adjustments, but we're not suddenly saying, oh, guys, we picked the wrong location. Let's load the trucks and go somewhere else. He's very well prepared, and because he's also the writer, he can write himself out. He can write himself out of problems.
That's a
That's a great tool to have, yeah.
Oh my God, it's the best.
When you're gearing up for a new project, especially nowadays, how do you go about choosing the camera system that you're going to shoot the project on?
It comes down to, so I have used both the Venice 2 and the Alexa 35. It comes down to how much night work is there, right? So the Alexa 35, even in its extended range, does not handle 3200 ISO as cleanly as the Sony Venice 2 does. And I can tell you because I tested both cameras in Manchester and took them out to the DI, and I could not get the noise levels where I wanted them, even with all the Airy stuff and talking to Airy and everything else. So when I just did these, I just did a couple weeks of reshoots for Robert Elswood on a movie called Ella McKay with Jim Brooks. He shot on the Alexa 35, so obviously I took his camera and lenses. And that camera, day exterior or day interior, is just magnificent. The colors are beautiful. The highlight range is gorgeous. I really like that camera. But if I was doing the little things and I had to shoot down and dirty in the streets of LA with Denzel, who's not the most patient person for me to light, I probably wouldn't choose that camera. I would choose the Sony over it, because I know that if I go to 3200 in the extended range mode and I shoot it at over 4K, I'm going to get a very clean image at the end of the day. It literally comes down to that. What is the basis of a movie? If it was all night work, I'd probably take the Venice. And if it was mostly day work, I would definitely take the Airy.
Nice. Does the sensor size ever play into it? I know some people are like, oh, full frame doesn't have a look. You can, there's that whole argument that you can get a similar look.
I like full frame only because I came out of the world of anamorphic film, and full frame has the same kind of magnification. It's a 1x magnification, just like anamorphic, over Super 35. So do I like that? Certainly. I would rather shoot, even if I'm on a practical location, I'd rather be jammed into the corner on a 24 than I would on a 17 in Super 35, even though they have the same field of view, because there's less curvature, So I do like full frame just because you grew up shooting 35 millimeter still film, and that's what full frame is. And it makes sense in my mind. That said, I've shot a lot of 35 millimeter 185, not a lot, but a few movies. Most of what I did regular 35 millimeter was anamorphic. So, what is a 17 millimeter in spherical is a 35 in anamorphic in terms of field of view. Now, granted, a 35 has more compression. And I think that's why people are drawn to it, because the human eyes are a 40 millimeter lens. So, yet we have a pretty wide field of view. So I think, to me, full frame is more akin to the human experience. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that that's the reason why you should shoot a movie that way. You may want to be really wide and close, like James Friend did in Ballad of a Small Player, the movie with Colin Farrell, right? He's in there, a lot of field curvature, a lot of bowing, but that's not done as a mistake. That's done as a choice.
So, John, going back to your relationship with John Lee, it seems like the last 4 movies you shot together are like getting darker and darker and moodier. Is that just an intentional thing from John Lee and you?
No, I think it just has to do with what the subject matter is. So the Little Things that I did with John Lee was a movie that he wrote in 1989 that Steven Spielberg was going to direct, and then David Fincher made 7, and then that movie got shelved. But John Lee retained the rights to the script, and finally we made it in 2017, which probably was too late for that movie in terms of the story, because it made more sense in the time period before smartphones. That said, it was a great experience. I have a picture hopefully in prep with John Lee that is not dark. I mean, subject matter might be dark, but the world that it's set in is daytime, that. So I go where John Lee is a great writer. And if he calls me and says, I'm doing something, I'm going to do it. right? I
Yeah, of course.
so love collaborating with him. And he's a director. If you watch all the movies that I've done with John Lee, the one thing I will say that is a through line through all of them is location is a character. John Lee believes that locations are characters in the movie. And it started with The Rookie. So The Rookie was based on a true story about the oldest pitcher to ever be a rookie in Major League Baseball, a guy named Jimmy Morris. And when we went to go shoot the movie in sort of spring and summer in Austin, Texas, they're supposed to be in a place called Big Lake, which is in West Texas, a very desolate kind of part of Texas where if you have any drive and any smarts, you're going to want to get out of there as soon as you graduate high school, right? There's no place you're going in Big Lake other than working at the fast food place, right? It's a 4-stoplight town. And I said to John originally, well, let's shoot all the high school baseball late in the afternoon. It'll be really pretty. So the first day we went to do that, I looked at the dailies the next day and I said, oh, God. And he's like, what are you talking about? He goes, it looks beautiful. And I said, yeah, but the whole point is that these kids want to get out of this town. So I went to the first day and I said, we're shooting baseball between 9 and 3 when the sun is directly overhead. Yeah. The contrast is high. And I want it all to look pretty bleak. And and John said, I get it, let's do it. And that was a bold move. But that's John's understanding of the landscape is as much a character in the movie. Mm-hmm. Same in The Highwaymen, the two guys that go and capture Bonnie and Clyde as they travel across the western United States. I mean, big vistas with very deep focus, right? Mm-hmm. That's John. He's like, think The Searchers, right? This is what we're doing here, right? He has very specific ideas on locations. They're not just, we're not just shooting coverage. We're really trying to shoot the environment. I mean, John is a guy that doesn't shoot a lot of coverage compared to other directors that I work with. Mm. He'll say to me, no, this plays in a 2-shot. Those two guys silhouette right over there. That's all I need.
I think that this thing that you just described is explains very clearly what I think it's the duty of a director of photography. It's just give the story what the story needs, even if you sacrifice beauty or you sacrifice your own showing off. It's just, okay, we're gonna shoot with the hard light because it's what the story needs, and I'm not damaging the story because of that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, but you don't always get, look, as you all know, there are lots of other people. So when I first started, and it was Michael Bay and I on The Rock, Jerry Bruckheimer was the producer, but he was never around. It was just Michael and I. No one interfered. No one bothered us. We did whatever the hell we wanted. I was 31 and he was 29, right? I mean, Sean Connery was older than the two of us if you added our age together. And we were completely unmolested. And that's part of why I think the movie has the energy and the look that it has. I don't find that that's necessarily the world that we're in as much anymore.
Nope.
We're no longer making movies for film studios with a legacy of filmmakers. Look, studios were always run by accountants, but the guys that ran the studios were filmmakers, right? When I did The Rock, Joe Roth, who had been a producer and a director, ran Disney. So I had a guy who had he had sat in the director's chair, right? So that was something that I don't find today. Today we work for media companies, and I don't think they have the love or the historical understanding of filmmaking that we all do. So it's a bigger battle. So now I find that sometimes I will say, I think we got it. And then somebody will say, yeah, but you might just want to get a piece of coverage. And I have a saying, but it doesn't usually go very far, which is coverage makes cowards of us all. Mm-hmm. And then somebody says to me, yeah, but you're not going to be in the editing room in 6 months. And what I have no response to that other than, okay, we'll get a close-up over here. Yeah. Because it is your job. I mean, at the end of the day, we work for directors, right?
Yeah.
you do your best to plead your case. Now, I can plead my case with John Lee, who also doesn't need the money. He's made so much money as a director and a screenwriter. I'm not saying he's worth $1 billion, but let me put it this way. He doesn't have to work again a day in his life. So John is less beholden to the producers in the studios. He'll stand up and say, no, this is all I need. I've got it. We're moving on. Other directors, I don't feel as though they may be on such terra firma as John. And their attitude is, well, if we got the time, why don't we just do it? My attitude is, if you do it, you might use it, and it might make the scene worse. But look, that's our job, right?
Yeah.
You plead the best case you can, then you let the jury decide.
Yeah.
I feel like Wanmi and I had this exact conversation when I started working for him early on and shooting some second unit stuff that you shoot it, they're going to use it. So careful.
Yeah.
Right. And, I will say this. Michael Bay is an interesting human being, and I've known him since he was 10 years old, right? And I shot all of his student films, and we came up through the music video and commercial world together, and then did The Rock and all those movies. Michael has an incredible eye. He was a really good... He used to shoot stills of young girls, like headshots and stuff. He's got a real commercial eye, and he knows lighting. He doesn't know how to do it, but he'll say, I don't like that light. I don't like the way it's coming in. He wouldn't say, give me a whatever over here, but if he doesn't like something, he's going to let you know, and he's usually not wrong. So the thing about Michael is, everything you shoot for Michael, he's going to use, and Michael's not going to make a bad shot. Michael's not going to kowtow to pressure. He's going to do what he wants to do. And there are times when I say, Michael, I think we should get this he's like, nope, I don't need it. Let's go. We're going over here. So he's whether you like his films or not, he's a true filmmaker.
So, you and Michael Bay, before 40, you guys did The Rock, Armageddon, and Pearl Harbor. Did you ever have the feeling of where I go from here? Because, before 40, you were on the top of the ladder, the top of the food chain. In Hollywood, and did you ever thought about what do I do now? Or
Well, it's a very good question. So I finished Pearl Harbor, and I thought, where do I go from here? Does this mean I can only do $200 million movies? And am I only going to get offered these big studio movies that require an incredible amount of logistics? Am I getting away from the cinematographer who did Benny and June, right? Because that was really my love, was lighting and storytelling. So I got sent the script. I had met John Lee, and John Lee had given me the script for The Rookie, and I read it, and it was going to be his first movie. And he said, look, I can't pay you. And I said, look, I want to do it. It's a great movie. I enjoy baseball. I played baseball in high school, which is a kind of an American thing. So I understood the game, and I said, I really want to do this. And I remember the studio, Disney, said, you can't do this movie. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, it's a $9 million movie. That's like 3 weeks on Pearl Harbor. And I said to the head of the studio, if I can't do this movie, then I shouldn't be a cinematographer. The whole idea of being a cinematographer is that you can do anything. So they finally acquiesced, and they literally were not going to let me shoot this movie for $6,000 a week, which was union scale, right? Mm-hmm. They just thought, I was going to bring so much baggage to it. And I didn't, and we shot it in 35 days. And it was an incredible experience. I had so much fun. And because of that, I got a call from this director, Gary Ross, to do Seabiscuit, which I had read the book and I had loved the book. And Gary Ross, when I went to interview him, said to me, if I looked at your credit list, there's no fucking way I'm hiring you. I'm not hiring the guy that did The Rock and Armageddon and Pearl Harbor and Conspiracy Theory. He said, but my 12-year-old son made me take him to this movie called The Rookie. And I watched this baseball movie, and I realized this is what I need Seabiscuit to look like. So that's how I got that job, and that kind of changed my career. And that's when I stopped working with Michael, because I knew that Michael had a certain style and he was going to make a certain kind of movie. And if I had gone and done Transformers, which I didn't do, but my camera operator, Mitch Amundsen, did, I would have been making the same movie over and over again. That's not a bad thing. It just isn't what I wanted to do. So by finishing a $185 million World War II drama with a $9 million sort of sports drama, it changed the direction of my career in a really, really good way. And also, it's where I developed my relationship with John Lee.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go the other side of that, like before the successes, before the kind of mountaintop. Was there a moment where you felt it? You're like, this is the shot. This is the moment to prove something prior to everything kicking off.
Well, I don't know if I could say this is the shot. I mean, certainly, I was very lucky that very early. So when I had been shooting commercials for Michael Bay went to a school called Art Center College of Design, which is known as a school for car designers. It's in Pasadena, and they have a very small film department. And the goal of Art Center, unlike other film schools, is not to make narrative filmmakers and directors, but to teach people how to get hired in the industry. So Michael's class was 8 people. It was Michael, Larry Fong, and Tarsim, and then 5 other people, right? So it's a very small school. So they were allowed to use outside people to do their student projects. And I had just gotten kicked out of USC. So Michael and I would do these spec commercials on the weekends. We would watch a Joe Pitka commercial or a Leslie Decter commercial. These were the pantheons of the greatest commercial directors of the time back then. Bruce, Dowd, we would do an Evian commercial and we would rip them off. So by the time Michael got out of Art Center, we had a really good show reel put together. 2 weeks later, he gets signed by a very small music video company called Propaganda Films that had 3 directors, Nigel Dick, Dominic Senna, and David Fincher. I had never done a music video. I didn't even have MTV. I had no fucking idea what this was. So within a week there, Michael gets a music video. We go out and shoot it. And it looks like a sexy commercial, right? I mean, we're on train tracks and pulling out all the shit. It's all backlit and beautiful girls and some guys playing guitars. And, I know how to do that shit with my eyes closed. A week after that, I get a call from David Fincher to go shoot a Paula Abdul video. I have no fucking idea who David Fincher is, right? I have no idea who the hell this guy is. So I meet him. I realize very quickly, boy, this guy's really fucking smart. I mean, he's like smarter and he knows more about cameras than I do. I mean, I'm only 28 years old. I mean, I can't even load a camera, right? I was never a camera assistant. And we do this Paula Abdul video that goes on to win every MTV award there is. And the thing about it was that I was very smart. I listened to everything that David Fincher said. He told me where to put the camera, where to put the lights, and I said, yes, sir, right? Because everything that he did was just spot on perfect. And I ended up with this 3-minute and 35-second music video, and at that point, I was shot out of a cannon, right? I'm the guy Mark Plummer and I were the 2 guys that shot for David Fincher, and that was like, that was working for Bertolucci, or whoever, pick your director, right? Back then in the mid to late 80s, I mean, I was doing Madonna, and I was, it was unbelievable. So after a year or 2 of that, and then Michael and I and David, we'd all transitioned into commercials because commercials were starting to want to look like music promos. Mm-hmm. So I'm suddenly doing Nike, and now we've got big budgets, and now you're not only seeing my stuff on MTV, you're seeing it before a football game, right? And, I'm winning the best ad for the Super Bowl and all those things. So I'm getting a lot of cachet, and I'm actually starting to really make some money. Like me, I can actually maybe buy a house. So I get a call to work with a kind of older commercial director by the name of Jeremiah Chechik, who back in the day was a huge commercial director who had gone off and directed a couple of features, one which was successful, and the other had bombed, and he was trying to resurrect his commercial career just as a way of making a living. So I was kind of the young blood, right? I was probably 15 years younger than Jeremiah, but we hit it off, and for about a year we did commercials, and then he handed me a script, and he said, "Look, I'm going to make this movie called Benny and June, and I really want you to shoot it." And I said, "Great." And it was an $8 or $9 million movie with Johnny Depp, and Edward Scissorhands had not come out, so Johnny Depp was just the guy on 21 Jump Street. The original co-star was Julia Roberts, who was kind of becoming a big actress. And I went in, and the studio said, "Well, you don't have enough credits. You know, you haven't done anything. You've done a couple of low-budget horror movies, and yes, we love your commercials, but this is a movie." And fortunately, the two producers on that movie, Susan Arnold and Donna Roth, the two women who owned the script and were producing it, believed in me. And they stood up for me, God knows why. And I got to go out and shoot that movie in Spokane, Washington in 1990 in 35 days with no real feature credits. And it started out as a non-union movie, but because Edward Scissorhands came out while we were making it, and Johnny Depp was now a movie star, the union came up and organized the movie in Washington. Now, as it turned out, I was the only member on that crew who wasn't in the union, and it was impossible in 1990 to get into the camera union. You could not get in to it's now 600, but back then it was called 659. Mm-hmm. The doors were closed. I would go there every year and say, "Look, I shot 200 days last year. This is what I've done. I've done 50 national commercials. I want to join. I'll pay you the entrance." They said, "Sorry, there's no spots on the roster."
Wow.
By getting a movie organized, you get into the union. So not only did I get to shoot Benny and June, which got a lot of critical praise, right? And my work was noted for being kind of European and pretty and atmospheric. I also got into the union, which suddenly meant that I could now go and actually do a studio movie if one had gotten offered to me.
Wow. Going even a little bit farther back, you just mentioned a while ago that you were kicked out of USC. What happened?
Well, so when you're a graduate student, if you get below a B, it's considered a failing grade. Mm-hmm. And so in USC, every semester there are 6 graduate thesis films. And if you don't direct it, you have to work on the crew. Now, a little backstory. I was a really pretty good still photographer. And as a kid, I had not only a black and white darkroom, but by the time I was 18, I had a color darkroom with a 3-color head in Philips enlarger. So I understood color chemistry. I knew how to print, right? Granted, I was printing type R, but I understood how to set printer lights. And I also understood cameras and lenses, which gave me an advantage over everybody else at USC who came in who really wanted to be directors. Whereas I went in there and I thought, I really want to be a cinematographer. I really like photography. So I was the one guy in that school that understood the difference between a 12 millimeter lens in 16 mil and a 40 millimeter lens, right? Everybody else just stood in the corner with the zoom lens and said, "Do this," whereas I moved the camera around. So I became the guy that everyone wanted to shoot. If they got their thesis project accepted to direct, I was usually the first guy they went to see if I would shoot it. So my friend Phil Giuano made a movie called The Last Chance Dance that I shot. And the professor of cinematography, who will go unnamed at the time, has shot a lot of Hollywood feature films, but he and I just didn't see eye to eye. And so every Thursday we would run all the dailies, so mine and the other 5 films, and I'm not saying anything out of school. The other 5 films look like shit, and mine actually looked like a professional movie, which really, I think, pissed off the professor even more. And so he would just constantly give me a hard time. And then one day, because USC has such a long legacy, Caleb Deschanel, the great cinematographer, came to our cinematography class to lecture, and he watched the dailies. And at the end of that class, I went to Caleb and I said, God, this professor hates my work. And Caleb said, the day he likes your work is the day you know you're doing something wrong. So at the end of the semester, I got a C in cinematography, which is a failing grade. And the faculty at USC decided that it would probably be best if I left. At the same time, the director submitted the film to all these festivals, and it started winning every festival award for student films there was, including, at the time, an award called the Focus Award for feature films and feature cinematography, or student films and student cinematography, that later became the Student Academy Award. And I won that. So I won that award, and I failed and got kicked out of USC for the same movie. Now, you're 25 years old, you've got this award. The director that you worked with has now been hired by Steven Spielberg to direct his first movie, but you're not coming along, right? Even though you did this great student film, you're 25 years old and you're sitting there going, now what do I do? So I got a job. I started working as a PA and an electrician for Roger Corman. I needed to make $1,000 a month to pay my bills. And for about 2 years, I did behind the scenes press kits, anything I could do to keep myself on set. I knew when I was shooting a behind the scenes press kit interview with an actor, and I'm on the set of Hook for Spielberg, this is not what I want to do, but I'm watching what Dean Cundy's doing in the background, right? I never lost sight of my goal. And then it's a case of just timing. Then suddenly music videos started to happen, and I was working with Bay, and then he graduated and got signed by Propaganda. I mean, there was no great design to this. The design about it was just trying to make the most interesting images I possibly could every time I had a camera in front of me. That was it. But the opportunities started to grow and grow and grow, and part of it was in 1988, there was a lot of money being spent on music videos by record companies, hiring young directors that didn't know what they were doing, and also the record company didn't know what they were doing. So it was a perfect opportunity to go out there and screw things up. Because at the end of the day, you were making a 3-minute and 30-second commercial for Taylor Dane, or you pick the artist. I must have done 100 promos, Aerosmith, whoever it was.
Wow. This is be a weird one. After all that, after Armageddon, The Rock, The Rookie, Seabiscuit, all these movies, all these films, all these music videos, what makes you nervous nowadays? Anything?
Everything. I don't think I sleep the night before day one. I usually have the runs. The moment I show up on set on day one and I'm not nervous is probably when I should probably hang it up. Everything makes me nervous because not the same things that made me nervous when I was 27, but you want to do the best work you possibly can. And as you get more experienced, you see things that no one else does, but you go home at night, and I know this is true for you guys, and you just go, God, I wish I could have that back, right? Mm-hmm. Now, everyone else is telling you it's really beautiful, but you're looking at something in the background going, I fucking should have set a flag. I just should have asked for the extra 5 minutes, but I was trying to be a nice guy, and the actress said she had to pee, and if she had to go back to base camp, the light was going to move, and the da-da-da-da. And I just said yes. And I then kicked myself, right? So my standards, can I walk in and light a room quickly based on knowing the story and knowing the location? Certainly. But it doesn't mean that it's always going to be right, and you want it to be right. And my level of scrutiny upon my own work has gotten much, 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 much higher. People say, it's fine, let it go. It's like, we can't let things go.
Yeah,
That's the difference between cinematographers and other people. You can't let it go. No one else sees it. My wife doesn't see it. I see it. It's staring me right in the face, and I hate it every time I see it.
At some point, I thought I was the only dumbass that wasn't sleeping the day before the first day in the movie, and I saw Round Table with Roger Deakins and I think it was Benny Delhomme and Wally Pfister, a bunch of like super top end, and one of them say, "Hey guys, do you sleep before the first day of shoot?" And all of them were like, "No, there's no way we do." And I suddenly was like, "Oh, thanks God, I'm not the only one. Everybody does it." So yeah.
No, I don't sleep, and I usually have the runs on the morning of the first day.
Nerves.
Yeah, but that's good. It keeps you on edge, right?
Yeah, if
It
you're not
keeps you
constantly
on
pushing the
your
goalpost, something's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fight or flight thing. You want to be, and people do say, I mean, look, I don't yell or scream. I don't raise my voice, but I'm very intense and I'm very focused. So people, they sort of steer clear of me because they know I've got like tunnel vision, except for my crew, obviously, who said, "Hey boss, hey Gov, what do you know?" But the rest of the group sort of give me a wider berth because I'm like a cat hunting, a big cat.
So one thing that you have that I think it's not common. You still have and had really long relationship with directors like Michael Bay, and you went from, as you said, from school to making 3 huge movies. Your relationship with John Lee, it's been forever. And now with Paul Feig, you got another one going on.
Right. So Paul Feig and I have been friends. We were partners at USC Film School. So of all the relationships, Paul's the longest. He and I became friends in 1982. Mm-hmm. Right. He had asked me all along his career to photograph his movies, but I was just never available. John Lee and I have been working together since 2000, and Michael Bay and I since 1986. And I still, from time to time, work with Michael on commercials. I just don't do features with Michael anymore because I don't have the patience for his style of working anymore. I don't need that kind of headache. And not that I don't have the energy, because I have a ton of energy, but it's really like, really, Michael, do we have to do this again? Come on, just tell me what you want. So I choose to do like we do, high-end fashion commercials. He'll call me and say, "Do you want to come to whatever, Milan, and do a 4-day job with me?" And I'm like, "Oh, 4 days? Yeah, the crew probably won't quit after 4 days. Okay, let's do it." Because Michael's difficult, He's difficult because he doesn't like to prep. He just wants to show up and have everything in place and go, which I can do better than anybody else that shoots for him, but it's a lot of work. It's more work than it needs to be, As I used to say with Michael, I may not have you lit, but I have you surrounded. You just, and no one's going to say no when you say I need all this equipment, right? Because no one wants to deal with the wrath of Michael. Whereas John Lee is very specific. And so is Paul, right? Paul is less specific when it comes to performance in that I may say to Paul, "Look, we've got 4 scenes to do today. We should really be done with this by 11. But if he's not getting what he needs, we may be there till 1. And then it's upon me to figure out how to make up the rest of the day on the other end. Now, his job as a director is to get the best version of the scene he can get, right? Not to say, "You're right, we should get out of here, but I don't have the scene." I don't ever want to walk away from a scene when a director doesn't feel like he has it. But obviously, there are other people standing back there who are looking at their watches.
What would you say that you have learned from each of them? Like something that unique that working with John Lee has give you after 20 years, working with Paul has give you after 20 years. And so, because at the end of the day, DP director relationship is just like an odd couple. I mean, you grow together, especially after such a long time. So what will be what you have learned from each of them?
Well, because John Lee, he's one of the 3 highest paid script doctors in Hollywood, right? So John Lee gets paid north of $500,000 a week to polish scripts, right? He's on that very short list with Scott Frank, who's his best friend, and a few other people. But John's ability to analyze a scene and then say to me, look, forget about where the camera goes. This is what this scene is about. Help me figure out how to tell it visually, right? He's about that. Here's the moment where the scene reverses. Where do we need to be with the camera? He's all about the drama and the moment and where is the camera and who is it on. Paul is very much about I love the way this place looks. And I'm like, well, how do you think we're going to stage it? And his attitude, he'll say, I don't know, you make it look pretty and I'll just move the actors through it. So Paul likes to kind of figure it out more on the day. That said, we all know what the scene's about. But John is the one who really can break a scene down to its essence. And therefore, okay, this moment, I think, now we can all make mistakes and be wrong, but I can say to him, John, I think this moment is here, right? And John won't shoot unnecessary coverage, whereas Paul likes to shoot a lot of coverage, and he tends to create the performances more in the editing room, whereas John Lee will kind of more edit in camera, right? And they're both very valid ways of making movies. One is Paul's comfort zone and the other is John's, right? Mm-hmm. John will cut a shot if we're setting something up because he'll say, I'll never use this part of the master for that, and I want to save the actors. And I'll say to him, you sure you don't want to run it all through? He goes like, no, because we're going to be over here for that, right? He's, in a way, more old school, probably more like the era of the Sidney Lumets and those people who kind of cut in camera. Mm-hmm. But they're both really good at dealing with actors. They do it in different ways, but they're both very, very good at that. And then with Michael, it's really just about, people ask me, why did you do that shot like that in The Rock? And I said, because Michael thought it looked cool. That would be Michael's thing. I'd set up a shot and he'd go, that's not cool. And then he'd go, somebody give me a wedge. And he would Dutch it. And he'd go, see, that's fucking cool. Let's shoot. So but Michael's a very visual person. In other words, he would look through the lens and see it and go, that's it, right? He couldn't describe it to you, but he would take that hi-hat on the ground and drag it around in a 2-foot circle until he found the exact spot that he wanted. Now, it may have been the exact spot where Mitch Dubin had placed it first, but nonetheless, that's his process, right? And you have to respect it. You just sort of stand back and you go, I'll bet you $15 it ends up right back where it started. And then somebody hands you $15, right? But that's how, you don't get upset about it. You don't get angry about it. You just understand this is how it works on this set.
Nice.
Do you have a favorite, it's a hard question, a favorite genre of film that you like working in? Or is it more just like, it's got to be a good story?
I don't have a genre.
Or is the person, or is it the director? Yeah.
Look, the idea is I'm a cinematographer. I can do everything, right? When we did The Highwayman, I wanted it to be in black and white. I was going to shoot it in color on the Sony Venice, but I was going to utilize the color channels like you would use black and white filters on polychromatic paper, and I was going to utilize the green channel, the red channel to really craft a black and white image. And Netflix said no to me, and the reason was because they had cashed all their chips behind Roma, and they didn't want 2 black and white movies coming out at the same time. But I used to have one monitor in black and white and one in color. It was my intention for that to be, I wanted it to be a black and white film. Because John Lee had said, my inspiration for this movie is HUD, the great movie with Paul Newman that James Wong Howe shot, and also The Searchers, which obviously was color. But I love them all. I mean, I just think it's about the story, and then you figure out your style based on the story and the time. Obviously, time has a lot to do with it. This movie I have that's opening in theaters December 19th, The Housemaid, is a thriller, all shot on location. Primarily, we built a couple of bathrooms on stage. But we only had 32 days to shoot it, right? 32 days, and we shot 9 hours a day. So we had to be quick quick and clever, which meant finding a location that would work, a big mansion that would work in such a way that most of the windows were north facing, so that if the weather changed, really only thing was going to change was the ambience coming in, so that I could work very quickly with only a small amount of light coming through the windows to augment, as opposed to having to relight every scene. And you don't make friends with the locations department when you're constantly saying, no, this isn't going to work. I told you the windows need to face north. You start to make, not enemies, but you're like, and finally you find the house and you go, yes, this works, because we've got 42 pages of dialogue and we've got 8 days to shoot it.
So, who were your cinematic heroes when you started, and who are now, if you have any?
Well, I mean, so I was very fortunate. I was Vittorio Storaro's apprentice on a movie called Tucker, A Man in His Dream. So I was always a huge fan of Vittorio's work, and Gordon Willis was a family friend. So I had access to two of the great cinematographers of all time.
Royalty right there.
Call, and so was Conrad Hall, because my uncle was a very famous doctor in Los Angeles who had cured Conrad of a very severe tropical illness. So if I called Conrad, he was going to answer the phone, right? Wow. So I had access to 3 of my heroes. Pretty much, I could pick up the phone and call, right? And then I was obviously Vittorio's apprentice. And then, look, I look at people's work today, and what I'm amazed at is how there really aren't any, I don't see much bad cinematography anymore. I mean, the level is so high. The person I love, and I loved, and when he moved to LA, I helped him get a crew, was a cinematographer who passed away by the name of Harris Savitas. And I love Harris's work, even though, again, he was the exact opposite of me. I'd say sometimes we'd meet at the lab at Technicolor in the morning, and I would be walking out, and he'd say, "What are your printer lights, John?" I'd say 43, 42, 47. And he'd say, "Oh, I'm hoping to print at 17, 20. Yeah. And, I was like, two guys I was overexposing, he was underexposing. But his work to me always just was beautiful, right? I mean, if you look at the stuff he did with, what was that movie with Mark Wahlberg? He did a bunch of movies with James Gray, and I think they're really beautiful to look at. And he was a lovely, lovely man. I mean, one of the loveliest you'd ever meet. And, today I look at Darius Kanji's work. I still think it's really spectacular. But there were there were 25 cinematographers whose work you would follow, because there weren't a lot of jobs. And now there are 300 world-class cinematographers. I mean, I've known Roger Deakins since 1987, and I think his work is always amazing. Greg Fraser lives down the street. I think his work is unbelievable. Ellsworth lives 2 blocks that direction. I think his work's amazing. I mean, there's lots of talent out there, and it's nice to be part of that group of people. I don't think I'm as good as them, but it doesn't matter. I go out and try to do the best I can do every day. And all I'm trying to please is myself. And obviously I hope the audiences like it. I'm not trying to win awards. I'm just trying to go home feeling like I did the best job today that I possibly could have, and maybe I did better today than yesterday. And I'm trying to make sure the movie's as good as it possibly can be. That's all I really care about, and that's enough to keep me up at night and to get me going in the morning. Because when I show up at work, man, I got a lot of energy. I get there an hour before everybody else. I don't want to have to talk to people about anything. I just want to walk around the set with nobody in my ear. I'm there well before everyone. I'm there before the camera crew, even with their 32-minute pre-call. I am just sitting there, usually there before the caterers even started making breakfast. Somebody in the AD department will get me a breakfast burrito or whatever, but I just want to have that quiet time to soak it all in, reread the scene, look at it with nobody there. Maybe it's dressed for the first time. Maybe I can look at stuff and go, maybe we should move this around. Just so I can get my head together before 60 people descend on the set and it becomes kind of controlled chaos.
Is there anything you haven't done that you're itching to do?
No.
I mean, again, just another really interesting
Simple
movie.
question.
I would love to have done One Battle After Another. I think it's a fucking great movie. No, I mean, I don't. The only thing I haven't done is what I haven't read. You know, there's no great book that I'm dying to do. I'm just looking for interesting material and interesting actors, interesting directors, and producers that will allow the director that they've hired to make the movie that they want to make. When I did The Green Hornet, originally I was hired by Stephen, what was his name? He did by the director of Kung Fu Hustle, Stephen Chow, right? And Kung Fu Hustle was I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a great movie, super cool Chinese kind of musical action movie, and I got hired by him to direct The Green Hornet. And this was a movie that everybody wanted. I remember John Toll called me and said, "How the hell did you get this movie?" And I said, "Because I can speak a little bit of Mandarin. That's why I think I got the movie." Because when I met him, I spoke to him in Mandarin. And we were prepping the movie together, and then we broke for the Christmas holidays, and he never came back. He decided that he didn't want to do a big studio movie. And I remember when we were prepping, I said, "How many days did you shoot Kung Fu Hustle?" And he said, 200. And I said, "Stephen, they're not going to give you 200 days to shoot this movie." He said, "Oh yeah, if we didn't like it, we just went back and did it again the next day." And I said, "I don't think it's going to work that way." And I think as he went on through the process, which is different than in China, and he's having to have meetings with the production designer and the line producer about how expensive these sets are or whatever, he's suddenly realizing the sort of commoditization of filmmaking in America. So anyway, we break for Christmas, we come back, and he's gone. And now I go to the line producer who I'd done 2 other movies for, and I said, "Well, I guess I should just go find another movie." And he said, no, the studio wants you to stay on. They're going to pay you every week. I said, "I've got nothing to do." He said, "I know, just come in on Monday, walk around the office, come in on Friday, walk around the office, walk through the accounting office so they know that you're here, and we'll send you a check." And this went on for weeks. And I was like, "What's going on?" And they said, "Oh, we've hired a director." I said, "Great." And they said, "Who?" "Michel Gondry." Now, I was a huge fan of Michel Gondry's work. I mean, both his commercial work and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But I remember that Ellen Kurz was his DP. And far be it from me, and I think this is true of all DPs, to get in between a director and a DP, right? So the first thing I said to myself is, I'm going to call Ellen and ask her that if she wants to do this movie, I'm more than happy to walk away. By the way, I've already been paid for 22 weeks of prep, having done nothing, right? So I've made a ton of money. And I called Ellen and she said, "No, I don't want to do it. You go work with them." So then I went and had lunch with Michelle, and I said, "Look, I know I'm on this movie, but don't feel as though you're obligated to hire me. I'm more than happy to go. You can bring in whoever you want." And he said, No. He said, "I think you would be good to help me navigate through the big budget studio situation." So, that's how I did that movie. I think that the mistake was that we had big American producers who had done the Fast and Furious movies, and they would not let Michel make the movie he wanted to make. So we would start out in the morning, we would do this totally cool Michel Gondry front surfaced mirrors, dimming lights, super kind of funky, the kind of stuff you would do as a film student, but real Gondry-esque. And then the producers would come in and they'd say, "Can we see what you guys did in the morning?" They'd look at playback and they'd go, "Well, where's all the coverage?" And I'd say, "There is no coverage." And they'd say, "Well, no, you got to shoot coverage." And I'd say, "Well, you can't I don't want to get stuck between you, but you're putting me between the director and you guys. You go work it out." So at the end of the day, they hired Michel Gondry to not make a Michel Gondry movie. And that was a mistake. In my mind, it was a mistake. It was not I don't think it was a very fun experience for Michel. It certainly was not the Michel Gondry experience that I was hoping to have. I used to have the Michel Gondry experience from 8 in the morning to noon. And then I had the Universal Studio experience from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And the Michel Gondry experience was far more creative. You know, dryer hoses and mirrors and prisms and all kinds of weird stuff. And then suddenly after lunch, it became very traditional filmmaking, albeit with some flair, but not the funkiness and the kind of bare bones Gondry style. So, you know, that's a tough situation. So what you want to do is find that you're working with a director whose producers are going to be supportive. Now, it was a $150 million movie, so in my mind, probably the studio went kind of like, oh, Michel Gondry sounds like a great idea, but they didn't really do their research to think about the kind of movies that he makes, right? Mm-hmm. So it was one of those where every executive was like, we got Michel Gondry, but I don't think any of them actually had seen a Michel Gondry movie, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
What you're in for.
Yeah. So that was like, you know, that was a tough experience. But that said, Michel did the best he possibly could, but he was put in an impossible situation and didn't really get the opportunity to make his movie, and probably, you know, never would have given the budget. And I think it was just a case of they picked a really talented guy, but he was the wrong guy for that gig, and it happens.
Yeah.
Was there ever a moment throughout your illustrious career where you entertained the idea of directing?
There was a period where I did. After Seabiscuit came out and after The Rookie, I got offered a couple of movies to direct. Now, one of them was a really interesting project about this famous American athlete named Jim Carlisle, who won a bunch of gold medals at the Berlin Games and then had them taken away because he had been a semi-pro baseball player. Mm-hmm. And it was called the Carlisle Indian School. It was about how these kids who were Indians got sent to these American schools and all of the kind of Indian traditions were stripped out of them. And John Sayles, who's a really great filmmaker and writer, you know, who did Matewan and all that, wrote the script. But what I realized very early on as a director was, as I was developing it and I hired Channing Tatum to play Jim Thorpe, he had never acted before. And I thought we were getting some momentum. And I felt like I could do this movie. It was period. It was in my wheelhouse. But the studio kept going, no, we want another rewrite. We want to know this. One of the things is when you're a first-time director, you don't get paid to prep a movie. Mm-hmm. So now I'm 8 months into the prepping of a movie, and I've got bills to pay. I've got 2 kids in private school. I've got a wife. I've got a mortgage payment. And I was like, okay, and by the way, the movie never happened. But I realized I don't have $5 million sitting in the bank to finance this project that I love. And the reality is that there are directors coming to me with very, very interesting movies whom I really like. And I'd rather be shooting a really good movie than directing The Mummy 2. Because I was getting offered these big action kind of tentpole movies where you knew, okay, this is number 2. They are expecting bigger box office, but they want to spend less money. None of the actors really want to be there, but they're contractually obligated to be there. And do I really want to go from shooting an Academy Award nominated movie like Seabiscuit to Mummy Part 2? I don't need to be a director that bad. I'd rather be the best cinematographer that I can be than be a mediocre director. Mm-hmm. So I stopped directing. I was directing a lot of commercials for a long time at Ridley Scott's company, and I had a couple of very good years of doing that. But every time I got them, and my momentum would be going, I'd get sent a really good script, and I would go to Jules Daly, who ran RSA, and say, I'm going to take 8 months off, I'm going to go do this movie, which they didn't like because they had invested a lot of time and money in developing my career as a commercial director, and I was making them a lot of money. But I just, at a certain point, you don't want to listen to an account executive tell you how to do your job. You know, I was just like, I'm over this, right? I know how to do this better than you'll ever know. I've forgotten more about this job than you'll ever understand. I understand that you're worried about losing your job, but trust me, I'll help you not lose it. Don't tell me how to do it. Yeah. And now I only do commercials. I've aged out of the commercial business because I don't do them very much anymore unless it's a big movie star, right? So if it's Sydney Sweeney, she'll call me and say, I'm doing a ad for so-and-so, can you shoot it? If it's George Clooney and he's doing Espresso, I'll get a call to do something like that. But I do one commercial a year. I don't go off and shoot promos. I don't have the contacts with the directors anymore. And you know what? Just like I broke into the business at 27 with Michael Bay shooting Nike commercials, as it should be. Young commercial directors should be using their young DPs. They shouldn't be using me because that's not right. The best thing to do is to let those people who created the reels that got the advertising agencies interested to continue working together as a team. Jerry Bruckheimer fought for me to shoot The Rock. The studio was never going to let me do it. It was way too big a movie. Benny and June was not. You don't follow up Benny and June with The Rock, right? This is a huge. They're spending $12 million on Sean Connery. It's an $89 million movie, and I've done a $9 million indie. But Jerry Bruckheimer said, look, you love Michael's show reel. This is the guy that shot it. This is the guy he feels comfortable with. This is the guy you should hire. And Jerry was a big enough producer that he took a chance on me, and that's how my career in features really got started. And, you know, there aren't as many people like that in the business anymore that can see, you know, can really see understand how the business works. And it was an amazing thing for Jerry to take that leap of faith. It paid off. The movie made $800 million. You know, I mean, it all worked out in the end, but he didn't have to. The studio wanted Don Peterman to shoot it, who was a great cinematographer, but they paid me, you know, a third of the amount of money, and I went out and kicked the shit out of it.
Yeah, really. You truly did.
And knowing the way Michael works and the way that you know his idiosyncrasies and stuff, it's fun to think about how things would have gone, like with a different pairing and the friction, and it's a weird thought experiment.
Michael had done Bad Boys before The Rock, which I didn't do because my father was dying of cancer, so I didn't want to leave him, so I stayed with my dad. But he had a cinematographer, a British cinematographer named Howard Atherton, who's very accomplished, but it did not go well. It did not go well at all.
I worked as a second AC for Howard when I was like 19 or something like that. Yeah.
So Michael didn't. So Jerry knew enough because Jerry had produced Bad Boys to know that he wasn't going to go down that road again, and there was no way Michael was going to let him. Right. So
yeah.
John, one question that we ask to every cinematographer we talk to, which is like kind of a game. If you have to choose one lens to shoot the rest of your career, choose one lens, not one series, one lens. Which one will you choose?
I would probably. Are we talking what format?
Whatever.
It's up to
whatever
you.
It's just up to you.
I would say that most of the movies that I've shot, I would say 50% of the film is shot on a 40 millimeter C-series anamorphic lens. Mm-hmm. I try to ascribe, and this was something that Gordon said to me early in my career. So when Gordon would shoot The Godfather, and they would shoot the scene of Sollozzo and Michael and Sonny and Don Corleone in a room talking about the business proposition. Let's say that they shot that on a 32 millimeter Baltar. Gordon would generally shoot all the coverage on that same lens. So if he shot the master on a 32, he would shoot the coverage on a 32, and maybe if he was going to change the lens, he would only go to a 40. He wouldn't go, I'm going to shoot the wide shot on a 32, but I'm going to shoot the close-ups on a 75. He felt that by moving the camera in, you maintain the same kind of field of view and perspective. And not that I do it because The Rock, I was on a 17 and then on a 300. But when I'm shooting a normal movie like The Rookie, as much as I possibly can, and obviously practical locations can make it difficult, I try to ascribe to that. So in The Housemaid, which is coming out, if the wide shot is shot on a 28, the coverage of Sydney's probably shot on a 32, not on a 100. Right? Unless I'm going to the 100 for a photographic effect. I want the background to really fall off. If I'm trying to keep the scene flowing in a way and not make the cuts jar, I tend to try to move the camera and stay within the same family of lenses. Doesn't mean if sometimes you look at certain people and you go, okay, I don't want to shoot her on the 32, let's go to the 40. But, I try to stay there. I don't go, okay, we shot the wide shot on a 21, now let's go put the 65 on for coverage.
Yeah. So 40 C series?
40C. It's probably
40C.
been 20 million feet of film.
Love it. And you shoot those, you said, pretty deep?
I'd shoot, so again, because of being a member of the ASC and spending a lot of time in the clubhouse, when I was making the transition to shooting anamorphic lenses, I sought the advice of people like Stephen Burum, who had done a lot of anamorphic work. And what he said to me was, look, these lenses will open up to a 2.5, but because it's a prime lens with an astigmatizer and a curved front element, you're going through a lot of glass and you pick up a lot of chromatic aberration, which reveals itself in a little bit of lack of contrast and a lack of sharpness. Now, anamorphic lenses don't have at a given stop as much depth of field as a spherical lens anyway. But he said to me, look, these lenses, the C's and the E's, because that's all there was back then, look best at a 3.5 to a 4, right? They snap, they pop. So the first time I went to go use them, I went to Panavision. We put them on the projector with Ralph Sasaki, Dan Sasaki, the great lens designer's father, who ran the anamorphic lens department at Panavision. And he would literally show me, and you'd go look at the Siemens chart and realize that at 2.5, you saw magenta and green around the edges of the black, but at a 3.5, all of a sudden the blacks were black. Well, you know what that translates into. It translates into more contrast and a sharper image, because as we all know, there's resolution, which is how many line pairs we can resolve, but the human eye really sees focus through contrast, as does your autofocus system in your camera, right? Mm-hmm. So contrast, having a certain amount of contrast helps ensure that you have a image that looks in focus. And I also don't like one eye out of focus and one eye in focus, unless you're doing it for an effect, like on The Rock, where you're racking from Ed Harris's gun to one eyeball with that bright blue eye. Otherwise, if he's talking to somebody, I want to see both eyes. That's my way. I know the young generation likes to shoot everything wide open, but I want to hold from the tip of the nose back to the ears. I see the world that way, right? When I go outside and you all walk outside, you're carrying a lot of depth of field. Doesn't mean you have to on the film lens, because there are times when you don't want to see the background. But I know on a John Lee Hancock movie, we've picked the locations. He wants to see what's out there. So on The Highwayman, I worked with Panavision to build a set of lenses, large format lenses, that I could shoot outside in an 11 without photographing the front element or getting any kind of refraction from them. So we moved stuff around to keep them soft, sharp, yet not overly contrasty at an 11, right? And that became the H series lenses, because John said to me, look, I want to put the camera on the hill. I want a little car, and I want to see all the way to the horizon, just like John Ford did. Well, you do that with a super speed, and you're going to end up starting to photograph the inside of the lenses, and you're going to get issues that you don't like. This was a way, again, because I have a relationship with Panavision, of these great lens designers. I don't know what they do, but they move certain things around, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, that looks good. You know, you know what you're trying to do, and you utilize those who are smarter than you to help you achieve it.
Absolutely.
John, is there a moment where you felt like you don't care about technique anymore? You only care about storytelling? I
like to think that's how I always approach it. I mean, I always think about storytelling, and the technique part of it is just, what do we need to, tell the story this way? Obviously, there are things where you go, okay, we should probably carry a remote head. Even if we're not going to move the camera, we should probably have it because it'll allow us to move more quickly. And obviously, John Lee's the kind of guy who will stand there and wait for you to carry a set of sticks up the hill. Paul Feig is not as patient as John Lee. So he wants to go, 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 especially if the actors are fired up. So if I say, okay, now let's just roll the camera over here, we can move quickly, right? Whereas John will be like, no, let's go over there. I don't need you to put it on a Technocrane and stick it out there. We can carry a set of stakes up there. I don't need the camera to move. So, you pick the tools for the job and the director. I never think about the tools on a technical level. I want to forget about them.
Well,
Oh my gosh.
John, it's been a huge pleasure talking to you. It's a delight to listen to you tell your stories. You have an amazing career that any DP in the world will love to have. You've been, I think you've been a master for such a long time, and it's an honor that having you here with us.
Well, thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it's nice to chat with DPs because there's a mutual understanding of, you show up for work every day hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. As I say, I read a script and I see the images in my mind's eye, and then every day between now, from that moment to when I've shot that scene, everyone is conspiring to not make that happen, right?
Yes.
And that's the challenge of the job, right? If you just let me do my job, this would be so easy and it would look exactly the way it should. But everybody's out there trying to screw it up.
Yeah.
Protect the image. Yeah, protect the story.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah. Thank
Again-
you so much, John.
Oh, you're
Thank you
very
so
welcome.
much.
It was a pleasure.